Welcome to the Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. We're going to tie a Goddard Caddis. This is a fly I learned a long time ago, and I've always kept a few of them in my box. It imitates a traveling sedge. It's a caddis-like insect that motorboats across the top of the water, and if you can imitate this motion, trout will take this with reckless abandon. The Goddard Caddis is responsible for my largest fish in Central Oregon. One evening on a local lake, I was casting over a rising fish and did one strip, and a big old rainbow came up and took the fly. So give this pattern a try. I think you'll like it. So let's review the materials list for this fly. For the hook, we're going to use a Daiichi 1180 size 14 dry fly hook. For the abdomen, where we're spinning deer hair, we're going to use an Ultra 210 denier fairly heavy thread to bind down through the deer hair. The color is not real important. For the example, I use black. For the abdomen, we're going to spin a natural deer hair, and I'm choosing the spinning hair down near the base of the fibers. This is hollow and it will compress and flare. For the forward part of the fly, I'm going to switch thread and use a Vivas 14-aught brown thread. For the antenna, I'm going to use two Whiting 4Bs hen hackle. The color is not that important in that we're going to strip this hackle down to its barb. And lastly, for the hackle, I'm going to use two Whiting dry fly saddle feathers in brown. So let's get started on this pattern. I'm going to tie on my thread, and I want you to note I'm tying my thread on way back toward the back of the hook. This is where the first grouping of deer hair will be placed, and I want to be able to pack the deer hair tightly together. So I need to leave the rest of that hook bare so the deer hair can slide when I pack it. So I've taken a bunch of deer hair, probably about the size of a pencil, and I'll carefully clean this to clear out all of the guard hairs. If you don't clean your hair, the hair won't stack. Rule number 1. So my thread is right where I want to tie in, and I'm going to place this group of hair right at that position. And I'll take 2 wraps of thread around it, and then I'm going to gently but firmly pull the thread toward me and flare the hair. And then I'll immediately take several wraps through the butts up to the clear part of the hook, and I'll stop and get the next batch ready. I might even throw in a couple of half hitches just to make sure this stays in place. Now you noted that first batch I didn't let spin. I held it in place with my finger and didn't let it move. The second batch we're going to spin, but this first batch I wanted to have it stay in place for the tail. Now I've taken a second batch, and I'm going to place it on the hook right in front of the first, and I'll take those 2 wraps around and then pull it gently toward me but firmly. And as I do, I'm going to let the material bleed out of my fingers and actually spin around the hook. And each wrap of the thread, I'll grab it again and tie a wrap through the butts, let it spin, a wrap through the butts, let it spin until I've got to the clear part of the hook again. And then I'll take my fingers and I'm going to jam this material back. I'm going to bunch it. I'm going to cause it to become thicker so I have room for another batch of hair to go on this hook. So now I'll take a third batch of hair and I'll spin it just like the second batch on the hook, and then I'm going to pack it tightly in place. and tie off with a couple of wraps, and probably half hitch this one as well. Okay, so now I'm ready to start trimming. I'm going to start with a cut on the bottom of the fly, and I want to cut as close to the hook as I can to make sure that hook gape is clear. The second cut I'm going to take on top of the fly, and this is a slightly angled up cut. I'm going to rest my scissors right on the hook eye, and I'm going to cut back toward the back of the fly. The third and fourth cuts I'm going to take on either side of the fly. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm creating a box. So I'll cut on the near side and the far side to create this box look. The final preliminary cut I'm going to take at the back of the fly, and I'm going to cut this at about a 45-degree angle, basically a little bit beyond the hook shank or the hook bend, and I'm going to cut all those longer fibers out to create the tent shape of a caddis fly. So now I have the basic shape of the fly, and very simply, once you create a box, then you can cut off the edges of the box and start cleaning up the fly a little bit to make it look more presentable. So I'm going to just do a series of cleanup cuts and get it to its final shape before we start the rest of the pattern. Now I've shown these cuts in the vise itself. Typically I would pull this out of the vise and do all of these cuts holding the fly in my fingers. It makes it a lot easier to do these trim cuts, and you can see them more clearly. But for the video I wanted to keep these in place so that you could more clearly see what I was doing. You'll note I've switched thread to the lighter Vivus brown at this point and tied it on at the front of the hook. I've taken two of my whiting hen hackles and I've stripped off all the barbs off the stem and reversed them so that they're opposing one another, or they're curving away from one another. And I'll tie this on right at the eye of the hook, and I'll wind it back to the deer hair, and I'll clip off the excess. And next I'll clip off the antenna about one and a half times the length of the shank of the hook. Now I want these antennae to curl upward, so I can use my scissors much like using scissors to curl ribbon. You can pull on it and kind of press on it and pull it upwards, and those stems will curl upward again, just like a ribbon. Next, I'm going to take two whiting dry fly saddles and tie them on dry fly style, shiny side back and the dull side forward. And I like to use just a little bit of a glue on the base underneath these. So I'm going to glue the top and bottom of the hook, so as I tie this hackle forward, it will stay put and not come apart in trout teeth. So I'll wind these two hackles together all the way up to the head position. And then I'm going to tie them off by crossing just the stem of the feather, and I do that by lifting and then folding back the feather to be captured by the thread. So I'll clip off the excess, and then I'm going to drop into a whip finish and whip finish to conclude this fly. So let me spin this around in the vise so you can see the underside and the profile of this pattern. This has been your Sunriver Anglers Fly Tying Corner for this month. Thanks for watching. Give the Goddard Caddis a try. I think you'll like tying this fly, and you'll even like fishing it better. And please join us on the web at www.sunriveranglers.org or at Facebook's Sunriver Anglers. And please subscribe and like our page. Thanks.